Hello and welcome to the GI podcast. I am your host, Sid Heeg.
And I am Toben Racicot.
Today we are joined by Shawn Desouza-Coelho, who is a former GI alum and a U-Waterloo graduate with a Master's of English in Experimental Digital Media. So thank you so much for coming down and having this
Thanks for
wonderful
having
little
me.
chat with us, especially since I think you were before our time, but before Toben and I joined the GI.
Yeah.
And we've been trying to go around and capture a lot of time, a lot of experiences from kind of like the first generation, let's say, of GI graduate students. So yeah, thank you for coming.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't really realize I was part of the first generation of graduate students at the GI. So cool.
Yeah. So why don't you actually we're gonna start with a primer question that we ask all of our guests, and it is, what is your earliest
Sure.
memory of gaming? This can be about video games, board games, card games, just any type of experience with what you consider to be games.
That's a really good question. My earliest memory of a game sort of having a really deep impact on me was Final Fantasy III.
Ooh.
Have either of you ever played that?
No, I have not.
3 is
well-
also what? 4, 5, 6? They like
6.
6. Okay, so I just played 6 this past summer.
Oh, cool. Okay, yeah. So you know exactly what I'm talking about here. So yeah, that was really my last Final Fantasy game because I don't know, none of them really had the kind of X factor that Final Fantasy 3 or 6 had for me.
I have opinions about
But so the moment is so you're on the floating continent,
Yep.
and Kefka decides to go full supervillain, betraying his commander, and then basically destroys everything by shifting the magical alignment of the world. And so the entire world essentially gets remade, and the party is flung off of the floating continent as it's destroyed, and they're all scattered to the wind. And then the first thing you do in the world of ruin, because we were in the world of balance before, and now we're in the world of ruin, you wake up as the character Celeste, and you're on a deserted beach by yourself. And you explore this beach, and you learn that you were in a coma, and that there were other survivors, but they eventually, I don't know, got so desperate they killed themselves by leaping off of a cliff. But you realize that a character named Sid has been taking care of you the whole time, and he's ill now. So the only gameplay in this section is having to catch fish and feed them to this character who's sick in his bed. And I think in my playthrough, Sid died because I couldn't catch enough fish, and it can go both ways.
Yeah.
And because Sid died, Celeste loses all hope and decides to kill herself by throwing herself off of the cliff. And keep in mind, I'm like 8 years old when I'm playing this. So I'm bawling my eyes out at just the loneliness and the grief of this moment. All my friends are gone. There's nobody left. The world's in ruin. It's all my fault. But of course, Celeste survives, and then you start to get the band back together. You meet your friends again, kind of thing. But when I think about my first memory of a game that like really affected me, the memory that always stands out is Celeste waking up on that beach after Kefka destroys the entire world, and then having to take care of Sid. And there was just, I don't know, there was just something so surprisingly tender about that moment, and it's something that I'd never really experienced in games before that. I mean, I think the game that I played before that was like Super Mario World.
Oh, that's a big leap to going from Super Mario World to suddenly this grief and devastation in Final Fantasy.
I know, right?
Do you own a Switch?
I do, yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna propose that you do yourself a favor, and when all the sales start going on, go buy Final Fantasy X.
Final Fantasy X, eh? Who's the main character in that one?
That's Titus and Yuna.
Titus and
So that's the
Yuna,
Blitzball
okay.
one. That's the one that's all about like water, and it's very kind of South Pacific influence
Oh, okay. All right.
in terms of aesthetic.
And why? What? Why do you recommend that?
So that's my favorite Final Fantasy
Okay.
to begin with. But in terms of emotions and shedding tears and stuff, that's one of the very few games that has an emotional reaction from me. But I've played it 3 or 4 times now, and it's one of those things where every time I play it, I understand the narrative a little bit better, or I can interpret it a
Oh
little bit
wow.
further, and things like that. And I think beyond the narrative, the combat has the most interesting advancements as well.
Is it still turn-based at that point?
It's turn-based, but it's kind of more puzzly. It's not just we have to deal damage. It's I have to kind of match elements, or I have to match status effects, or I have to do that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's still
Oh, okay.
it's not even like ATB, right? There's no bars filling up. It's just here's kind of your initiative, and you can mess with that through different forms. It's really fun.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. I'm learning about initiative right now because I'm playing Baldur's Gate.
Okay, well, we'll come back around to that.
Yeah. My first introduction to Dungeons and Dragons, and I'm hooked, let me tell you.
Okay.
I feel like that's
Yeah.
been everyone's experience, just from what I've been seeing online, because I'm not currently playing it, but who knows, that everyone is just like, oh no, all of the D&D elements that now people are getting like sucked into because of this game.
Yeah. Well, I've been asking people in my cohort, do you play Dungeons and Dragons? Do you play Dungeons and Dragons? Do you play Dungeons and Dragons?
Just go up to everyone and start opening
Yeah.
with it.
And what's the answer? Is it mostly no, or is it mostly yes? I feel like
So there's one
saying-
person in the cohort who is a diehard Dungeons and Dragons fan.
Okay.
So she's my go-to. And so like I think after like our Shirk applications go in and things die down a bit, we're gonna try to go to a Dungeons and Dragons night in Toronto somehow.
Yep.
Yeah.
Very cool. Sid, you've played D&D with me, right?
I've done.
Yes,
I
once?
remember doing like a short session with you and a few others a while ago. I mean, years ago at this point.
Yeah,
But
that
yes,
would be
I have done it
pre-COVID.
before, and
Okay.
I've done other isolated sessions with other people before as well. Just like small, short ones, because I don't think I have the time or the schedule to dedicate myself to like regular play.
Yeah.
What was your experience of that?
I mean, it was interesting, especially as a newcomer to the game. I thought it was going to be a bit more difficult to get into, just because of like, from what my perspective of Dungeons and Dragons is, it's very rules based, and there's a lot of math that goes on and a lot of luck of the draw in terms of what you're rolling, and you kind of have to give yourself over, I think, a bit more to the role play and just let yourself be a little bit more free in that sense, and just like not try to take things a bit too seriously, especially the way in which you're trying to create your character. Just like have fun with it and not try to make it too self-serious. I think that's kind of like been my experience with it.
But I'm
Okay.
sure Baldur's Gate's teaching you other things, Shawn, about
I mean, it's
the
you know
scope of what D&D can be.
It's honestly like the thing that really struck me was how, I suppose, regimented it all is in terms of like level progression and that kind of thing, and what's available to you when you level. Because my understanding of Dungeons and Dragons was really just, a kind of you freewheeling it the whole time, and like you level up and I don't know, how do you get these powers? I don't know. I didn't know that there was some you could choose from, and I didn't know it only went up to level 20.
Mm.
In 5th ed, yeah. In previous editions, the sky's the limit, basically.
Right.
That would
yeah.
make things so hard if the sky was the limit,
Right? Yeah, especially if you had a character that you've been with for 10, 20 years or something, right?
Did you make your own character, or did you pick an origin character? And if so, which?
Oh, I made my own character.
Ah, fine.
Wow, that was a really visceral response. Why? Should I have done the origin character? Or?
No, it just means you get that many more replays, right?
Yeah, that's true. I'm replaying it right now, and I did the Dark Urge character.
Okay, so that's an origin character. So that's an experience. I also think it's interesting. I feel like most people, when they start, they're either an origin character to start, or they create their own, and then everybody's second playthrough is always the Dark Urge.
I mean, it just seems like the most interesting way to go about the story. Yeah. Right? Because suddenly you're given all of these options that you never were before, which I imagine would be the case with any origin character. But I'm doing it as a a Dark Urge monk, and so
That's literally
it's
what my
like
second playthrough is going to be.
yeah, and so he's very or she's very all over the place in terms of her responses to things.
Right.
Because on the one hand, in one conversation she'll think, well, I could just kill everybody in this room right now, but then you have the monk options, which are like, no, the way of peace is the only true path.
So let's bounce back to talking about the Games Institute. So as someone who, we classify as kind of the first generation of it, talk to us a little bit about how you found it. Was it already in existence when you started at U-Waterloo, or was it something that was kind of being built up and you're like, yeah, this looks interesting, I'll go see what, this group of people are doing?
As far as I remember, I think it was still being built up. Like the
Okay.
Games Institute as an institution sort of existed, and there was a building, right? But from what I remember, like when you walked into the building, or when you walked into the actual sort of Games Institute proper, things were still being set up, right?
Okay.
Like I visited the Games Institute a couple years ago, and you have a virtual reality room now.
Yep.
Oh, we got a lot of
Right?
rooms.
Yeah, like we didn't have that. We
Yeah.
we didn't have that at all. Like we were still naming what the alleyways were.
Oh my word.
Yeah. And so I think that I think that being a part of that from the beginning, there was a lot of sort of pieces still moving around and a lot of finding itself happening, and I think that a lot of the kind of traditions and the procedures that are in place right now, they were still being formed at that time. So it was a little bit not unsettling, but it was a little bit hard to sort of like, feel grounded in the place at the time. But truthfully, I didn't even know it existed until I met Neil.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had no idea, because I went to Waterloo for my undergrad as well.
Okay.
And I graduated in 2010, and then I started at the Games Institute in 2013. And I had no idea that the Games Institute was even a thing. But then I met Neil, and honestly, I didn't even know game studies was a field of scholarship either.
I feel like that's like a common experience. Is like everyone meets Neil, and then he's like, "Why don't you come visit me at the Games
Oh
Institute?
yeah,
Or,
absolutely.
why don't you take part in my little game studies course?" And then that's how we all get suckered into it, and here we all are.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, anybody who's ever met Neil will tell you he's persuasive. And it's great because he makes you feel like you can do anything, right?
It's true.
Yeah.
And that the resources are available to you in order to do those things. And I think what's great is that the way that the Games Institute has been built up over the years, that I think you all have, way more resources available to you now than we did starting out.
So how did it support, did you do like a dissertation or a thesis or a major research project during your master's?
Yeah, I did an MRP. And Neil was my supervisor. And I mean, the thing that I really liked about Neil as my supervisor is that he's a very hands-off supervisor, and so he was very much like go do your thing and we'll check in kind of thing, right? Because I mean, there are supervisors who are very, very strict about, you have to have this done by this time and that kind of thing, and that's just not the way I work. Like I sort of thrive on a lack of accountability. And so it was a great fit between me and him.
Yeah.
Sorry, what was the question?
I was a little curious just about like the major research project that you were working on, because I know you've worked on quite a few projects that we have posters hanging up in the GI. A lot of them are theater related, especially related to Stratford. So I kind of wanted to know about like how you got involved in these projects and kind of like what came out of them.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, my MRP was really kind of focused on the intersections of narrative and play in games. And I was sort of asking questions about how we experience narrative through the act of play. and how that experience might be enhanced in line with the design goals of a given game, whatever those design goals are.
Mhm.
And I was fascinated by this idea that the rules of a given game are typically a window into the game world. You know, you kind of learn them so you'll forget them. So
Mhm.
they become this kind of implicit background that allows you to experience the narrative and the environment, etc. Um, and you sort of feel this when learn a game and you play a game and then you leave it for like 2 years and then you come back to it and
Mhm.
suddenly you're so focused on, wait, how do I do this thing again? How do I even move? What does this button do? Which is how you felt when you first started, right? Where you're not immersed at all in the narrative. You're just trying to figure out, well, how do I do anything, right? And I think a lot of games, view their rules and their control schemes like that, which isn't unlike cinema, in that originally cinema was just filmed theater,
Mhm.
and the camera was this kind of like fixed window into a theatrical set. But then a cinematic revolution came about when filmmakers realized that it was the camera that told the story as much as what was shown through its lens, so through focal length and depth of field and camera angles, etc. And I think when I started my master's in 2013, games were only recently coming around to this idea that the rules,
That's true.
or like everything from the in-game logic to the control schemes, they're telling the story as much as what's shown through their lens. And the example that I used in my my MRP about the sort of the state of the interaction between rules and narrative right now was Heavy Rain.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is like a narrative masterpiece, right? Just a masterstroke. But what I found so odd about that game is that like the controls were so the controls were so like novel when I first encountered them, but
Mhm.
then as you go through the story, you sort of realize that like the context in which the controls match the narrative, it doesn't really show any kind of progression in any way. So
Yeah.
the example that I use in the MRP is that at the very beginning of the game you play as Ethan, and you got to brush your teeth, right? And so you're just like waving this controller up and down in front of your face, and you're brushing your teeth, right? And then fast to a different point of the narrative, and Ethan now has to saw his own finger off.
Not only
And what do you have to
that.
do? What do
Yeah.
you have to do? You have to do the same action as you brush your teeth,
Oh my word. And what's also
right?
so interesting is, like, from what I remember of that game, is that sometimes the controls mean absolutely nothing. So there's this point where the main character is chasing down a suspect, and you're given like QTEs, like quick time events, to
Right.
like avoid hitting certain things. But it doesn't matter if you hit the quick time event at all. Like, you can just watch Ethan do like a slip and slide through, like, a grocery store, and it doesn't mean absolutely anything to the narrative if you do this mechanic, because it doesn't matter in the end. So that game just has very interesting ways in which it tries to include like a simple like controller mechanic, and then sometimes it completely forgets about it and just the narrative plays out as it's supposed to play out.
Yeah, it's like the illusion of choice, pretty much, right? It
Hmm.
doesn't matter.
Illusion of control.
Yeah. And so I wanted to, like, I was trying to theorize a system that actually sort of, where the rules change as the narrative changes, right?
Hmm.
It sort of like at a fundamental level, as the story progresses, the rules kind of shift congruently with it. Um, and a game that I thought did really well in terms of kind of getting you to face uh, the consequences of your kind of progressive actions throughout a game was Spec Ops: The Line.
Yes.
And in that game you play as Captain Walker, and the sort of fundamental question of the game is, how can you murder all of these people and still feel like a hero, right? Which is the sort of common thread in games like Call of Duty or Overwatch or whatever, right? That sort of valorization of military might, right? Where you can massacre hundreds and thousands of soldiers and somehow you still feel victorious. But the thing about the thing that lost me in Spec Ops was the way you played the game didn't change, right? And so it still felt, shooting a character still like felt at a kind of bodily level the same at the beginning of the game, where you're just entering this military theater, as at the end of the game when you're a psychotic mess because of all of the impact or the psychological toll that your actions have taken on the character, right? And so that's what I was really trying to explore in my MRP. How do you create a system that shifts the rules so that like the fundamental way you play the game is a kind of a gradient that changes as you progress through the narrative. And so it's like it's not contextually based, it's based in the plot.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Were there any other types of games that you were exploring in your MRP? Like any types of like different types of like a genre of games or games that have different forms of gameplay?
I mean, some standout games sort of come to mind, like Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons.
Okay, I think I remember that one.
Yeah, it's the one where you have to control two brothers with both joysticks.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I thought was a really sort of novel way of going about it, going about the control of the character, or the characters. And the moment that really struck me in that game was, sort of spoiler alert, but the game is decades old now, probably. But the moment that really struck me was when one of the brothers dies, right? And what happens is, when you try to move their joystick, the other brother just like drops to his knees and starts crying.
Oh, very cool.
Right? Because like the other brother's not there to sort of embody that control anymore. And so I looked at that and I was like, yes, how do you take that moment and extend it throughout the entirety of the game?
Yeah. Because there's certainly some sort of like interesting emotions that you can get from how games tell these very important moments and how they both utilize the narrative but also the mechanics to make it really impactful. And I can't recall many that do that like make both the narrative and also the controller aspect of it to be meaningful.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, yeah, up until that point, like my experience with that kind of contextual congruence between the narrative and the control scheme really only came about like when a character was confused, for example, or drunk, or sort of disoriented, where the left is right and right is left and forward is backwards, that kind of thing. So yeah, like those were some examples of games that really kind of struck me, or resonated with me in that way.
How much time in Brothers is that the play state where the one is dead and the other is not? Is it pretty close to the end and it's like
it's pretty
hour?
Close to the end, yeah.
Okay. So do you think that they would do something like that and be like, okay, we're all building up to this, and this kind of twist is going to blow people's mind? Like, do you think the whole game was created just so that experience matters?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I think that if I would hope that was the designer's intention, and that it's not, and that it wasn't just, hey, let's try this cool thing. And it makes me think about how in The Last of Us, all throughout the entire game, you have these moments where Joel helps Ellie up a ladder, right? And then right near the very end of the game, or sort of relatively near the end of the game, after a really sort of traumatic experience that Ellie has, Joel goes to help Ellie up the ladder, and Ellie doesn't come, right? And it's this
Mm.
moment of like dissonance between you as a player and the characters, where you realize, oh, the characters are like they're going through their own thing right now, right?
Mm.
And I strongly believe that was intentional. Like, it was
Mm.
absolutely intentional, that it was all working up to this moment of dissonance between the controls and the characters.
Because that makes me think of it is kind of, I guess it'd be earlier than 2013, but BioShock 1, right, I think was the first game to really do something like that, where you're
Oh,
making
yeah.
choices, or you think you're making choices, and then there's
Yeah.
the would
Yeah.
you kindly moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like
Yeah.
anybody who's ever experienced that, that's going to stick in their brain forever, because it was never done before that in that way.
Yeah,
And
'cause
the
Yeah, and
yeah, go
okay,
ahead,
well, I
Sean.
was gonna
Sorry.
say that, like, I was gonna say that I didn't play BioShock when it first came out. I only
Mhm.
played BioShock, I think, around the time when I started at the Games Institute, because I was looking into games that did that, right? That sort of
Mm-hmm.
had that kind of like flip at some point, or played around with the way that they viewed control schemes. Um, so yeah, I came to it at the same time as I did a lot of other games that did it, and so the kind of impact that had on me, I think, was different than it would have had on players first coming to BioShock when it was first released.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, and the reason I bring it up is I'm pretty sure it was the narrative designer talked about how much work went into that payoff, and how
Mm,
they were trying to make it not only impactful the first time, but every single time that you go back to it. So it's not just I played through BioShock 1 once and that's good. I know all the ins and outs, but to be able to deliver on that over and over again. And so that's why I was asking about Brothers, is like, is this something that happens halfway through and then it's like a different game because the only one of them is around and they kind of tweak the systems after that? Or is it this kind of, like you said, dissonance or kind of negative payoff? I don't know if that's the best phrase for it, where you get attached to both of these things and then it's so different for the last hour that you're kind of wanting it to be over, the same way that you're kind of sympathizing with the brother of like, I want this experience to not be reality anymore, or I don't want it to be this way anymore.
yeah, I mean, I definitely think it's the latter for sure.
Mm.
Mm. Okay, I'm gonna pivot the conversation a bit just because I want to touch more on your current research trajectory, especially based on some of the publications and other projects that you've worked on, especially
Sure,
those
yeah.
that have to do with live theater and your work with Stratford. So I wanted to just like get your perspective of what kind of like spurred your interest into getting into live theater and how you're kind of like merging it or having your game studies as kind of like a basis of understanding for how you're approaching your research into live theater.
Mm. So yeah, a lot of questions. So I mean, I like, in terms of, sort of what spurred me into going into the theater. I sort of fell into theater in high school,
Mm.
because in grade 9 you had to pick an art course, and it was music, visual art, or drama. And I couldn't sing or play an instrument, and I couldn't paint or draw at the time, so I took drama. But I remember doing a journaling assignment for the class, and we had to recount a fond childhood memory. It could have been anything. So I decided to tell the story of how my dad won this dolphin stuffed animal toy at the CNE for me when I was
Oh
really
my
young.
goodness.
And we recounted the story in front of the rest of the class. And I remember my drama teacher keeping me after class one day, after we recounted the story, and telling me, "Hey, you should stick with this. You're really good at it." And that really stuck with me. So I took drama all throughout high school. But unfortunately, I had already made up my mind as to what I wanted to study in university, which was systems design engineering, at Waterloo. And my older cousin was going through the program, and he loved it. And I thought, yeah, okay, that's the place for me. And then when I finally got there, I was so bored. I thought, oh my God, am I going to be using this degree in 5 years?
Oh no.
then some stuff happened in my life, and it really made me question what I was doing with it, and where I was going. And I realized that I was sort of fundamentally unhappy with where I was, and that I needed to be in a place that brought me joy. And so that's when I switched into the theater, and I ended up at Waterloo, and I ended up graduating with a drama degree. And really for me, the love of the theater sort of comes down to two things. I would say, the first is really the immediacy of it. You're in a room with folks, and you're sharing something that sort of lives and dies right there in that room. But there's also the camaraderie of it, where you get together with this band of people for a couple of weeks or months and go on this adventure together. And then at the end of it, you part ways, and some people you see again and some people you don't. Which is actually what I really like about RPGs and Final Fantasy. The part that always sticks out for me in those games is when, like, that inevitable moment when, like, the party disbands, and little chunks of characters go their separate ways, and then they'll all meet up in the end. Yeah, I really dig those moments. But yeah, so that's the kind of story of me in the theater. And I think how sort of games kind of factor into that. I mean, games for me have a very specific function in relation to my research on the theater. And maybe I should say a bit about my research, just for clarity, I guess. And so right now I'm really trying to sort of understand better how racialized performers navigate and negotiate theatrical space in the Southern Ontario theater industry. And it was really two experiences that happened last summer that kind of spurred me into this research. So in the summer of 2022, we were rehearsing a production of Shakespeare's As You Like It in High Park in downtown Toronto. And in the middle of Act 2, there's a banquet scene, and the Duke motions for me. I'm playing the First Lord. He motions for me to pass him a bowl of grapes, and it's like this mindless bit of business to make the scene seem alive. So I lean over to get the bowl, and then suddenly I feel this foot on my shoulder, and I'm suddenly bracing myself, and I'm stopping myself from falling to the ground completely, because the white actor playing Jaques had just kicked me because I was, quote unquote, pulling focus from him. And while this may not initially read as a racially motivated act, I think that George Yancey says something really good about this. He argues that white bodies take up space and move through that space in a capacity of ownership and possession, such that really only a white person that identifies with their own racial hegemony would even believe it was within their realm of possibility or power to perform that kind of action in that space. Like, it wouldn't even occur to me that was a thing that I could do to somebody.
Yeah.
Right. And so in a space that was designed to foster vulnerability and embolden actors to take it up fully, my racial body, my body as a visible minority, it immediately felt smaller than itself. I felt like I took up less space. I no longer made choices with my body because, whatever control I believed I had was sort of gone. And then the second thing that happened in that same play, as if the first wasn't enough, was I was playing Oliver in that production, and he's the minor villain in As You Like It. And in Act 4, I'm supposed to recount the story of how I've sort of changed my ways on account of my brother Orlando saving me from a lioness in the forest. And as I do this, a large hand-operated puppet version of my character acts out the scene behind me. And I had never seen that puppet before until the night of the first dress rehearsal. And I set foot on stage, and I saw it, and I was speechless because they'd painted the puppet's skin white.
Oh,
and
my word.
And so they'd literally turned me into a white person. And the next morning, after I sent the management an email saying, if that puppet goes on, I'm walking off the production. The white puppeteer comes up to me backstage and asks me to hold out my arm. And then he holds up his arm and he says, "Huh, I guess you are darker than me." Um, and then he shows me the new puppet, which he painted brown to match my skin tone. And it's funny because honestly, from certain angles, it looked like he just brown faced a white puppet. But anyway, so it's like it's these kinds of experiences that sort of spurred me to do the kind of research I'm doing now.
Yeah.
Because it's clear that like whatever safeguards exist in the theater that have been put in place, they're not working. So something else like needs to happen. And the way that games sort of factor into that is because, you know, if I'm asking the question of how at a kind of phenomenological level, how is the racial body taken up and produced in theatrical spaces, implicit in that question is a need to access the phenomenological experience. And I think that games do that incredibly well. And the example that I like to give people is Brenda Romero's game Train. Do either of you know it?
Don't think I do.
I don't. I know she's a good designer though.
Yeah, so it was created in 2009 as like one of a series of 6, and it sort of revolves around the notion of the mechanics are the message. And I wrote down the Wikipedia entry synopsis here because I think it does a really good job of explaining it. So in Train, players receive instructions from a typewriter to load people represented by yellow pegs to different railway stations. The player moves their trains by rolling dice, and they can use cards to slow down their opponent's trains or accelerate their own. Once the player reaches their final destination, it is revealed to be a concentration camp, such as Auschwitz or Dachau. And so in this otherwise innocuous board game involving pegs and rectangular boxes, I think the Brenda Romero was really good at getting players to essentially enact the defense of a lot of the Nazi soldiers after the Holocaust, which was, you know, it wasn't our fault. We were just following orders, etc. Right? And that revelation of that enactment no doubt awakens something in people, right? It's like it's a bodily experience that would be completely different if you know, Train were presented in any other format, like if you watched it or read it. Right. And so, you know, it's one thing to hear the description of that game, but it's another thing to actually enact it. And, you know, and no doubt there are memories and feelings associated with that bodily experience. And so what I want to do is, in my research, I'm building a game about my career as a visible minority performer in the theater industry. And the goal is to have other people in the theater industry play it. And when I hand this game to them, you know, that's what I'm trying to help them access. I'm trying to help them access a kind of bodily experience that's ineffable in a way, that kind of operates underneath the stories that we've rehearsed and told about ourselves, or the language that we use to present our histories. Because I think that giving a voice to that otherwise ineffable experience is what can help inform discussions and policies around safety in the theater for minorities.
No, that's super interesting because I've like listened to a few different podcasts about, you know, different live theater experiences, and often even when, you know, new stories are being created, new productions are being put to stage, and even if they have, say, like a diverse cast, a lot of people still ask the question, like, is the story that's being told a predominantly white, you know, coded story, or like a story that, you know, is very much a white experience of something. So even
Absolutely.
like that, it's just like especially with what you're looking at, maybe that will also help people experience of being like, it's not just who is on the stage, it's also who is doing the writing for the play as well, who is doing the directing and all that kind of stuff, who's doing the kind of like the background experiences that you don't physically see on the stage.
Oh, absolutely. And honestly, that kind of stuff, it matters in ways that you wouldn't even like initially think. And you know, and I think about for example the racist webcams, or the, you know, the racist like bathroom sinks or bathroom faucets that don't trigger based on certain skin tones, right? And you could tell that like clearly the sensors are calibrated for a specific range, right? And that nobody behind the scenes had the wherewithal to say, well, maybe we should extend that range, right? And so that's what I'm saying about like, or to your point that like the representation behind the scenes matters, right? It matters a lot.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So when thinking about that, like, do you have ideas for a game that you would make to kind of get the same idea across?
As of right now, it's funny, I'm like knee deep in comps right now. So the actual sort of ideation.
Whatsoever.
Yeah, the ideation is a bit on the back burner. But I know that what needs to happen in the game, like two things need to happen in the game that I have to wrestle with. One is how do I get people to interact with space? Right? Because when you're sort of inhabiting a game world, you're inhabiting space. But how do I get you to interact with it?
Mm-hmm.
And then the second thing is that, if we're talking about trying to access people's navigation and negotiation of space, right? Oppressed people's navigation and negotiation of space. I'm putting them in a game world where, through my rules and my constraints, I am sort of ipso facto the oppressor now, right? Because I control what they get to feel and when they get to feel it, right? And so that's a kind of, that's something that I still have to think about. How do I turn that into a productive? Because I don't think it's something that I can ignore. The question is, how do I make it productive? How do I tailor it to suit my purposes, right? So like I'm still trying to sort of answer those kind of fundamental questions before I even think about, is it a third person game or a first person game or that kind of thing, right? Or a platform or whatever, right?
Or like, would you even try to involve like other sorts of technology, like VR or some form of like mixed reality at all?
I had thought about VR. The question is for me about accessibility. Especially if I'm trying to get as many study participants as possible.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Not everybody sort of lives in a kind of driving distance of a VR space, right?
Yeah.
Many people still don't even own VR. Like I got a PSVR on sale just like a couple of weeks ago, right? And we're not talking PSVR 2, we're talking PSVR 1. Right?
The OG, yes.
Yeah, exactly. So the question for me is really about accessibility, but I know there are ways around that. Like you could do web VR, for example. So yeah, I mean, it's still stuff that I'm kind of mulling over. And I, like I said, I'm only just starting my comps journey, and so it's all very much still in the realm of like possibility for me right now. There's nothing sort of fixed, other than the plan. There's nothing sort of fixed about what the game is actually going to be.
That's fair, because like even like if we're talking about the difference between like a third person perspective game versus like a first person shooter, let's say, there's so many ways in which you kind of like think about your body as the avatar existing in different spaces, because when I'm playing like a third person perspective game, I'm so much more physically aware of the character I'm like controlling, versus first person shooter, I'm not at all. Just like I'm not even thinking about it, because that's not like the central focus of the game, right?
Right. Yeah. With first person, it's interesting. You think about Call of Duty, and it's like I'm a disembodied gun right now.
And comp season is also a great time to get into such a massive RPG like Baldur's Gate. So you're doing it right.
Well, it's funny because I got it maybe at the end of right at the beginning of September. Right, and I dumped like 100 hours into it. So I feel like I've gotten my money's worth, and B, I think the sort of obsession and stranglehold it had over me is gone, or that's subsided, so now I can sort of go to it like, it's a piece of chocolate cake that I can have for every now and again.
Yeah.
Do you have any other kind of comfort games that you go back to every now and again?
Ooh, Journey.
Yes.
Yeah, Journey
Journey's
Journey was like such a marvelous experience the first time I played it. Yeah, Journey. What other games? Dear Esther is one I come back to sometimes.
Okay.
Just for its sort of like, it has a lot of really poetic language that I really like, and it's really just this like walking simulator kind of thing where you're just sort of walking around an island from start to finish. What else? I mean, a game that a friend of mine play sort of, maybe every like 5 or 7 years is Resident Evil 5.
Oh, okay. Very nice.
That's
I first played that in like university, and we were roommates with one another, and we sort of like we fell in love with it, and it was so much fun. And so now whenever we go back to it, it's kind of like this sort of bonding experience or whatever. It's nice to so that to me is the comforting aspect of that game. Like the game itself is it's pretty standard Resident Evil.
Especially as like a Resident Evil game, because I know they've announced that they want to do the next remake is Resident Evil 5, and there's just so many things that happen in that game narratively that it's just like, oh, how are they gonna remake this for the modern times of like where we are culturally?
Oh my god, so problematic, that game.
But I've okay, this is what I've heard though, like so many people had such a good time with the co-op function of Resident Evil 5 that they just said they had a great time with it, that it's one of the more standout ones in terms of co-op, but story-wise it's just like, oh boy, going off to a fictionalized African nation and, doing some war crimes while you're over there, all in the pretense of stopping a biological, weapon, essentially.
Yeah. It doesn't have a lot going for it in terms of the story. not a lot of redemptive qualities.
Have you gone back to replay FF6?
I started it a couple of years ago. I downloaded like a ROM version on my computer, but I didn't get very far. And I think it was because at the time I realized that like I think with all Final Fantasy games they take a really long time to really get to where you want to be in the story. There's a lot of leveling and such. And a lot of world building that needs to happen. And so I kind of left it. And I haven't gone back to it since. And saying that reminds me of something my uncle said to me. Because my family moved here from Guyana in the 80s. And I asked my uncle one day a couple years ago if he'd ever want to go back to Guyana. And he said, no, not really. And I asked him why, and he said that he wouldn't want to ruin the memories that he has of the place.
Yeah.
Right? Because when you go back to it, like even from being as old as you are and experiencing the things that you have in the interim, it changes how you see the thing, right? And so there's this part of me that doesn't want to go back to Final Fantasy. Because of the kind of emotional hold that it had on me as a kid, right? And I wouldn't want to dilute those memories.
It's kind of like an interesting way in which, because I think the nostalgia factor, especially within gaming, is like so strong, especially with people, especially with a lot of game companies these days putting out like, oh, the remake, the remaster, relive your fun times playing with this.
How many times has The Last of Us been redone?
And it's not even an old game. Like I'm thinking of games that were like made in the early 2000s, like they're remastering Last of Us. I'm like, this came out 2013. That's not even that old. And it's just trying to recapture that sense of, oh, don't you love playing this game that came out 10 years ago? And I'm like, yes, it came out 10 years ago. That's not that long.
Yeah.
And like sometimes, like even when you do have like a good remaster coming out, it's not that much more, I would say. Like I've played like the remastered version of Halo 2. Graphics wise, it looks so good.
Right.
And I just have a lot of fun playing that game, but it's not really like it's not like, earth shattering in terms of playing a
Right, yeah.
remaster. It's not like it's rewriting the memories that I had when I first picked up this game, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's so like blatant that these are just money grabs.
Oh yeah.
You know?
And that's kind of like points to differences, like what's a remaster versus a remake, where I think the Resident Evil series is at least doing it a bit better than a lot of these other ones, because they're at least remaking some of the components of the game that make it much more interesting for a modern audience to pick up, especially for those who haven't originally played like the early series of Resident Evil games.
Right, yeah. Because they just remade 4, right?
Yeah, that was the big one that just came out.
Right, yeah.
We'll see if they even touch RE1, I think.
I mean, it's such a different it's such a different franchise that it started out as, right?
Yeah.
I remember I got the first Resident Evil and I couldn't play it. I absolutely couldn't play it. I was terrified because I was a kid when I first played it, right? And I made the dumb mistake of playing it, at midnight and all the lights are off. And
especially since that game is like, even in terms of mechanics, people will often say it's a difficult game to pick up because you had limited slots in your inventory, so you had to be really, really strategic in the things that you were picking up. And then because of just the way the game was designed, of just how you move through the space, it just makes it a bit difficult of, do you know where you're going? Is it even bright enough for you to see where you're going? And just even like how you think of space and how you're being even like chased around by the enemies. It just makes it a very difficult and restrictive experience.
I mean, even how you save was crazy to me. You got to get an ink ribbon and then you got to go to a typewriter.
Yeah. Oh, the saving experience too. Yeah, because it didn't have an autosave function. And then you're like, oh no, I'm losing all of the hours of gameplay I've pumped into this game because I couldn't find my way back to the save point.
Yeah.
So I also want to put in a plug for you to play Final Fantasy IX. I know I'm just heaping on the Final Fantasies, but the reason why that comes to mind is it is very theatrical in how its plot is set up.
Okay, all right.
I don't know if you've looked back at Final Fantasy VI, but they do the play within the play, right? They do that that technique. But FF9 is all that. It's very Shakespearean in how it runs its plot. And it's kind of that grandiose, like over the top style that Shakespeare would do. It's also very comedy and very tragedy. Like it treads the fine line between both of it. I think there's a lot of things you'd find really interesting as someone who appreciates the theater and the stage and how it's set up. Like even the fights are much more kind of set up as a theatrical experience than what FF6 or others would be.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so FF9 and FF10. Great. Yeah. It's funny because the last one I tried to play was FF8.
Oh, that's a rough one.
Well, it's funny because like I had this sort of 4-disc version of the game, and what was interesting, as far as I remember, the monsters leveled up with you.
Yes.
Yeah, and so I was like level 86 or something, and I was still on the first disc because I was just like killing everything. That was the only thing I wanted to do. I was just like, let's go find a monster and kill it. I wasn't even playing. I honestly, and then I left it behind for a month, and I came back, and I thought, I don't even know where I am in the story anymore. I need like a recap function.
Oh my goodness. All right. I think that brings us to the end of our time here. So I guess I'll end with this last question of, where can people find you or get into contact with you to stay up to date with your research?
Yeah, really good question. And it's funny because I actually don't have any social media or even a website. So I don't know the best way for people to stay up to date with my research. Uh, Follow Sid and Toben.
Yeah, we can link some of
I mean,
their
I'll
publications.
yeah, like I'll most likely create something, I guess, down the line to house
Mhm.
my progress for my dissertation and maybe demos of the game that I'm developing, that kind of thing, or like
Mhm.
list various publications, whatever. But other than that, I mean, maybe the best way to find out what I'm doing is just email me directly.
Yeah.
And so that's Shawn, SHAWNDDC at yorku.ca.
All right.
You should start a blog and keep us all informed about your experiences playing Final Fantasy 10 and 9.
Yeah.
Just start making a
That's my
recurring
request.
like blog or something of. Yeah.
But thank you for this. This was great.